The loud hum of the overhead fluorescent lights echoed through the empty hallways as Dan Armstrong adjusted his mop, sliding it across the polished floor. His eyes moved over the gleaming walls of the prestigious private school he worked at. It was quiet, too quiet for a building that was supposed to be filled with the laughter of the wealthy children of New Jersey's elite. The night shift was always the same: mop the floors, clean the bathrooms, and make sure the school was spotless for the next day. To most, Dan was invisible, just another janitor. But tonight, something felt different. Something was about to shift. He heard footsteps echoing down the hall. His heart dropped. He wasn't expecting anyone at this hour. As the sound grew closer, he felt a flicker of recognition. His fingers tightened around the mop handle, preparing for whatever was about to unfold. A figure appeared at the end of the hallway, framed in the doorway of the school's massive, glass-fronted lobby. It was Isla Graves, the daughter of the wealthiest family in town. Dan had seen her before, of course. She was the one in the wheelchair, always escorted by her overprotective father or one of her bodyguards. But tonight, she was alone. Isla wheeled herself into the room slowly, her wheelchair rolling smoothly across the polished marble floor. She glanced at Dan, her eyes meeting his for just a second before she quickly looked away. Dan cleared his throat. "You okay there, Miss Graves?" he asked, his voice careful. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she paused, her fingers playing absent-mindedly with the edge of her sleeve. The silence between them felt thick, uncomfortable. Dan took a cautious step toward her, careful not to invade her space. "I don't need help," she muttered, her voice quiet but sharp, as if she had said those words 1,000 times before. "I'm fine." Dan hesitated, his heart tugging at the way she spoke, like she was carrying a heavy burden that no one ever noticed. "You sure about that?" he asked, more to himself than her. Her gaze shifted back to him, this time with more intensity. "I know what you're thinking," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "I know you think I'm just another rich kid with everything handed to me, but you're wrong. I'm not. I'm trapped." Dan felt a lump rise in his throat. He had always assumed that Isla's life was perfect, the perfect mansion, the perfect family, the perfect everything. He never imagined that someone so rich could feel trapped. Before he could say anything, Isla continued, her voice more steady now. "They want to fix me. They think money can fix everything. But it doesn't. It never does." Dan stood there for a moment, processing her words. There was more to this girl than met the eye. A lot more. "Money can't fix everything." "No," he said softly, stepping a little closer. "But sometimes people just need someone to listen. You know, someone who isn't trying to fix them." Isla didn't respond. She just stared at him for a long moment, and then, without warning, she wheeled herself past him, leaving him standing there, his heart heavy with something he couldn't quite place. He watched her go, wondering what had just happened. Something was off in a way he couldn't explain. "Hey, I'm really glad you're here. Be honest, have you eaten today? What did you have? Tell me that, your location, and the time. And if you're new, don't leave without subscribing. It feels empty when you come in and leave without saying a word." Dan's hand hovered over the mop, his thoughts racing. He had just encountered Isla Graves, the daughter of one of the wealthiest families in New Jersey, and yet, in that brief moment, she seemed more lost and alone than any of the kids he cleaned up after every day. The smile she had forced on her face, the way she tried to keep her distance, it all felt so rehearsed. What was she hiding? Why was she really here, all alone, in the dead of night? A chill crept up Dan's spine. There was something unsettling about her, something deep underneath the surface. But what was it? What was he missing? He shook his head, pushing the thoughts aside as he resumed mopping the floor. But the image of Isla, her face twisted with a strange mix of defiance and vulnerability, lingered in his mind. He didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of something far more complicated. Something that would change everything. What do you think, guys? What's going on with Isla? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think she's just another spoiled rich kid? Or is there more to her story than meets the eye? Dan stood up straight, wiping his hands on his apron as he watched the hallway grow quiet again. The lights above flickered once, twice, then went still. The school felt like a different place now, as if it had changed in some subtle way. He turned to glance back down the hallway, the same hallway he had mopped countless times before, but now it felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, and as he looked around, it hit him. Isla wasn't the only one hiding something. He was, too. Dan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his heart skipping a beat as the screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. "You've been watched." Who was it? What did they know? The tension hung in the air as Dan stared at his phone, the words on the screen pulling him deeper into a mystery he hadn't asked for. Something was coming. Something neither he nor Isla could avoid. The harsh buzz of the school bell echoed through the empty hallways, its sound a stark contrast to the quiet tension in the air. Isla Graves was alone again. Alone, but not in the way you might expect. She sat by the corner of the school's grand lobby, staring at nothing in particular, her fingers lightly tapping the armrest of her wheelchair. She wasn't just staring, she was waiting. Her eyes flickered toward the large clock on the wall. 3:45 a.m. The cleaning crew was supposed to have finished by now, but she couldn't leave. Not yet. Dan, the janitor, had been the only person to look at her like she was more than just a charity case. Everyone else, her parents, the doctors, the countless tutors, they saw her as a problem to be fixed. She was just a broken toy to them, something they tried to put back together with money and treatment plans, hoping to get her to function like everyone else. But Dan was different. He didn't ask her to smile. He didn't ask her to be anything but who she was, and that scared her. The clicking of her wheelchair's wheels echoed as she pushed herself forward, coming closer to the doorway where Dan had been cleaning just hours ago. She stopped for a moment, her gaze lingering on the empty hallway. Every inch of this school was pristine, but it felt more like a cage than a safe haven. Isla closed her eyes, hearing the faint sound of the janitor's mop against the floor from the distance. She breathed in deeply, letting the scent of freshly polished floors fill her lungs. For a split second, the weight of everything, her family, her life, seemed too much to bear. Her hands gripped the armrests tighter, her knuckles turning white. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps shattered the silence. Isla's head snapped up, and there he was, Dan. He was leaning against the doorframe, a mop in one hand, and his other arm crossed over his chest like he had been waiting for her. "You still here?" Dan's voice was soft but steady, like he wasn't surprised at all, like he expected her. Isla bit her lip, trying to hide the unease that bubbled in her chest. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, her voice a little too sharp. She hated the way she sounded, fragile, broken, like someone who couldn't stand on their own. Dan's eyes softened. "Yeah, I get that." He leaned forward slightly. "You want to talk?" The question hung in the air between them, as if time itself paused for just a beat. Isla's heart raced, but she didn't say anything. She wasn't used to someone offering her an ear without a hidden agenda. No one had asked her that in so long. For a long moment, she hesitated. But something about Dan's presence, something about the quiet sincerity in his gaze, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could let her guard down for a moment. "I don't fit in here, Dan," she blurted out, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't belong. Not here. Not with my family. Not anywhere." Dan took a step closer, his shoes squeaking on the floor. "You do belong," he said softly, but firmly. "You just gotta find the people who see you for who you really are. Not the label, not the condition. You." Isla swallowed hard. The words hit her like a wave, knocking the breath out of her. "It's not that easy," she whispered, the tears welling up before she could stop them. She quickly wiped them away, but it was too late. They had already fallen. Dan stood there, motionless for a moment. Then, without another word, he knelt down in front of her, just low enough so they were eye level. The world seemed to hold its breath. He wasn't pitying her. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was just there. "Sometimes," Dan said slowly, Life doesn't give you what you want, but that doesn't mean you can't make it work. Isla felt something shift inside her, something she couldn't quite name. Hope? Maybe. Or maybe it was just the feeling that, for the first time in a long time, someone understood. Isla let out a shaky breath. There was something about Dan's presence, something calming and reassuring, that made her feel like she wasn't just a girl in a wheelchair. She was a person. A person with dreams, hopes, and maybe even a chance at something better. "Do you think it's possible to really change?" she asked him, her voice barely above a whisper. Dan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I do, but only if you want to." Isla stared at him for a long moment, processing his words. She had always thought of change as something external, a new treatment, a new doctor, more money. But Dan was making her question everything she'd known. Was it about fixing her, or was it about finding a way to be herself? She opened her mouth to say something, but just as the words began to form, a sharp voice interrupted them. "Isla, what are you doing here? This is a school, not some. Retreat!" The voice was cutting, angry. It was Veronica Graves, Isla's mother. Isla flinched. Dan straightened up and turned to face Veronica, who was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, her face tight with frustration. Veronica's eyes narrowed as she looked between Dan and Isla. "I don't know what's going on here, but this conversation is over." She stepped into the room, her voice cold. "Isla, we're leaving." Isla's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't want to go. Not yet. Not when she was finally starting to feel like she mattered. But as her mother's gaze locked with Dan's, Isla couldn't help but wonder, what happens now? The silence that followed Veronica's sharp command was deafening. Isla's heart thudded in her chest, every beat like a drum that was threatening to break through her ribs. She could feel the weight of her mother's gaze, the sharpness of her mother's words, as if they had already carved into her. But the strangest thing was that Dan hadn't moved. He just stood there, his gaze steady, his expression unchanged. He didn't look afraid or apologetic like everyone else. He just looked calm, unfazed. "Veronica," he said, his voice breaking through the thick tension in the room. "She's not a project. She's a person." Veronica's lips curled into a tight smile, but it wasn't one of amusement. It was cold, calculated. "I'm aware, Mr. Armstrong, but some people don't need to be coddled, and they certainly don't need distractions from the important things." Isla could feel the heat rising in her chest, the fire of defiance that was suddenly burning in her. She looked up at Dan, then back at her mother, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel the need to shrink away. She wasn't going to let her mother win this battle, not again. Not when she was starting to feel something. Something real. "I don't need your permission, Mom," Isla said, her voice quieter than usual but laced with a strength that surprised even her. "I don't need you to fix me." Dan's eyes softened as he looked at her. He didn't say a word, but his presence was like a quiet reassurance, like he was telling her, "I've got your back." Veronica's eyes flared with anger, but Isla could see something behind her mother's perfect mask, something she wasn't used to seeing in her mother's face. Fear. "You don't understand," Veronica snapped, her voice trembling with controlled rage. "I'm only trying to help you. I'm doing this for you, for your future." Isla's eyes flickered to the door that led to freedom. She had always been told that her future was in the hands of people who didn't even know her, let alone see her. But maybe, just maybe, she could take it back. Maybe she could finally be the one to decide. "I don't want your help. Not like this," Isla said softly, her voice trembling with the rawness of the truth she'd been hiding for years. "I want to live my life, my way." Veronica's jaw clenched. "You're not capable of making decisions like this, Isla. You need—" "Stop," Isla cut her off. "I'm not broken. I don't need you to fix me." The words came out with a finality that shocked even her. For a brief moment, there was silence. Veronica stared at her, as though seeing her for the first time, truly seeing her. Then, without another word, Veronica turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floors. The door slammed shut behind her with a force that made the walls seem to shudder. Isla let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She was free. For the first time in years, she felt a tiny sliver of freedom. The room was still. The only sound now was Isla's breathing, still shaky, but steadier than it had been a few minutes ago. She turned her chair toward Dan, who had been watching her carefully the entire time, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" Dan asked, his voice soft but firm. Isla nodded, though she could feel the rush of emotions inside her, threatening to spill over. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "I feel different, like I've been carrying this weight for so long, and now I can finally let it go." Dan took a cautious step toward her, his eyes warm and understanding. "You don't have to do it alone, Isla. You don't have to carry all of that by yourself anymore. But you've got to be honest with yourself about who you are, not just who they want you to be." Isla looked at him, her eyes searching his face. He wasn't like anyone she had ever met. He didn't have an agenda. He wasn't trying to sell her anything, or fix her, or make her feel sorry for herself. He was simply there. For a moment, they just stood in silence, the weight of everything still heavy in the air. But this time, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like possibility. "I'm not sure where to go from here," Isla said, the words soft and vulnerable. Dan gave a slight, reassuring smile. "You take one step at a time. You don't have to have all the answers today, and you don't have to do it all alone." Isla's gaze softened as she looked at him. There was something comforting in his words, something she didn't expect to find from a janitor. But then again, maybe that was the point. It wasn't about who people were or what they did. It was about who they were when they really saw you. Suddenly, Isla's phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of the moment. She fumbled for it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message. "Meet me in the parking lot. Now." It was from her mother. Isla's pulse quickened. What did Veronica want now? Was this really over? Isla's hand shook slightly as she stared at the message on her phone. "Meet me in the parking lot. Now." The words were cold, terse, demanding. Her stomach churned with the thought of facing her mother again, especially after everything that had just happened. The confrontation in the lobby had been a relief, a small victory, but she wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Veronica never let things go that easily. Dan noticed the change in her expression, the way her face had paled, and how her fingers now clenched around the phone. Without a word, he stepped forward, his presence like a solid wall between her and the rest of the world. "Isla?" he asked gently, his voice steady. "What's going on?" She glanced up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and frustration. "My mom, she wants me in the parking lot. Now, I don't know what she's going to do." Dan frowned, his protective instincts kicking in. He could tell this wasn't just a normal conversation. Veronica wasn't the type to just let things slide, especially when her authority had been challenged. Isla was caught in the middle of something much bigger than herself, and the weight of it all seemed to press down on her. "You don't have to go alone," Dan said, his voice firm with resolve. "I'll go with you." Isla shook her head, the feeling of independence creeping back into her heart. But it wasn't enough to drown out the fear. "I don't want you to get involved in this. It's my problem, my family." But Dan wasn't having any of it. "Isla, you're not alone in this. Whatever happens, you don't have to face it by yourself. If she's going to confront you, then I'm right here with you." Isla stared at him for a moment, something stirring deep within her. She had always been alone in these battles. Her parents were more concerned about their image than her feelings, her needs, her desires. But Dan was offering something different. He was offering something real. She swallowed, a lump rising in her throat. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, let's go." Dan nodded, his expression resolute. Without another word, he wheeled her toward the exit. The sound of their footsteps was the only thing that broke the stillness of the empty hallway. It felt like the world had stopped, waiting for what would come next. And Isla, for the first time, wasn't sure what that would be. As they approached the door, the tension in Isla's chest grew heavier. The parking lot outside was vast, stretching for what seemed like miles in every direction, empty except for a few scattered cars. The cold air hit her face as they stepped outside, and for a moment, she felt like she couldn't breathe. Veronica stood by her car, arms crossed, waiting. Her posture was stiff, her expression one of simmering rage. She didn't even look at Dan as they approached. Her eyes were fixed solely on Isla, cold and unforgiving. "You disrespected me." Veronica's voice cut through the night air, sharp as glass. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone. And for what? So you could be the victim in some sad little drama?" Isla's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to say something, anything, to defend herself, but the words got stuck in her throat. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She wasn't the problem. Dan stood by her side, unflinching. He didn't speak, but his presence was enough to send a message. Veronica's eyes flickered over to him for the first time, her gaze narrowing. "You!" she snapped, as though just noticing him. "What are you doing here? This has nothing to do with you." Isla could feel the heat rising in her chest, the urge to stand up for herself, but she held back. This was her fight. But Dan, sensing the weight of the moment, spoke up. "Actually, it has everything to do with me," he said, his voice steady. "Isla is a person, not a project. You can't just throw her away because she doesn't fit your picture-perfect life. She deserves more than that." Veronica's face twisted with disgust, her lips curling into a sneer. "And what do you know about my life? You're just a janitor. You think you have the right to lecture me? To tell me how to raise my daughter?" Dan didn't flinch. "I know about respect. I know about kindness. And I know Isla deserves a whole lot more than what she's getting from you." Isla looked between the two of them, her mother's harsh words cutting deep. But Dan's steady confidence was like a lifeline she hadn't known she needed. Just as Veronica opened her mouth to retaliate, Isla's phone buzzed again. She looked down at the screen, her stomach sinking as she read the message. "This isn't over, Isla. You'll regret this." Isla's pulse raced. Who was sending these threats? And what would Veronica do next? The parking lot felt colder now. The air was thick with unspoken words, and Isla could feel the pressure building in her chest. The message on her phone had set her heart racing, her thoughts spiraling out of control. Her mom's fury was nothing new, but something about this moment, standing here with Dan by her side, made it all feel different. Veronica stood still, eyes locked onto Isla with a fierce intensity. The silence between them stretched longer than it should have, thick with unresolved tension. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Veronica's voice cracked with anger, and Isla could see her fingers trembling as she clenched her fists at her sides. Isla swallowed hard. The familiar knot of fear tightened in her stomach, but there was a new feeling there too, something that didn't feel quite so suffocating. The presence of Dan beside her, unwavering, made her feel braver than she'd ever felt before. "I'm not walking away from you, Mom," Isla said, her voice steady but laced with defiance. "I'm just trying to make my own choices for once. I'm not your project. I'm not your charity case." Veronica's face turned crimson, her eyes flashing with disbelief. "You think I'm trying to fix you? You think I don't care about you?" Her voice rose in volume, causing a few heads to turn in the parking lot, but Veronica didn't seem to care. Dan stepped forward slightly, his gaze never wavering from Veronica. "It's not about fixing her. It's about listening to her. She's telling you what she needs, but you're too busy trying to control everything. That's not love. That's manipulation." The words hit like a slap in the face. Veronica recoiled, her face momentarily showing a crack in her armor. But just as quickly, her expression hardened again. She wasn't going to give up that easily. "You're just a janitor," she spat, her words biting. "What could you possibly know about love, about family? You don't even belong here." Her voice trembled with barely contained rage. "I don't need advice from someone like you. This is a family issue. You have no place in this." Dan's eyes flashed with something fierce, not anger, but something even stronger. Resolve. I might not have the family you have, but I know what it means to care. I know what it means to be a father. And I know what it feels like to lose someone you love." For a brief moment, Veronica's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. But before anyone could say anything else, the tension shattered like glass. Isla's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from the same number. "You'll regret this, Isla. Meet us at the house. You don't have a choice." Her hands began to tremble as she read the message. Her gut twisted, something dark and ominous gnawing at her. Who was this? Why was she being dragged into this mess again? Dan glanced at the phone screen and then back at Isla, his expression hardening. "Who is this? Your mom?" he asked quietly. Isla shook her head, the dread in her stomach deepening. "No, it's not her. It's someone else." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment crash down on her. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face whatever this was, whoever was threatening her, but she knew she didn't have much of a choice. Veronica took a step forward, a sneer on her lips. "You think you can hide from the truth, Isla? You think this is all some game? No one gets to walk away from me. Not you, not anyone." Isla looked up at her, heart pounding, fighting the urge to shrink back. She wasn't going to let her mom dictate her life anymore. Not like this. "I'm not hiding, Mom," Isla said quietly. "But you've been trying to control me my whole life. I'm tired of it." For a moment, there was silence. Veronica's mouth twitched, like she was about to say something else, but the words didn't come. Instead, she turned sharply on her heel, heading toward her car. Isla watched her go, a mix of relief and confusion swirling in her chest. Veronica was walking away, but Isla knew that this wasn't over. Her mom wouldn't just let it go. This was only the beginning of something bigger. Dan stood beside her, his presence steady and unwavering. "You don't have to go back to her. You know that, right?" Isla nodded slowly, her heart heavy with the uncertainty of the road ahead. She wasn't sure what was coming next, but one thing was clear: she wasn't going to face it alone anymore. As they turned to leave the parking lot, Isla's phone buzzed again, this time more urgently. She quickly checked the screen, her breath catching in her throat. "Your mother is just the beginning. Meet us at the house. It's time to face the truth." Who were these people? And why did it feel like the walls were closing in on her? Make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already. This story is far from over, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Who are these mysterious people threatening Isla? And what will she do next? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Isla's hand trembled as she held her phone, staring at the latest message. Her chest tightened with dread. "Meet us at the house. It's time to face the truth." The words danced in her mind, like they had been written just for her, specifically designed to pull her back into the world she was trying so desperately to escape. Dan's eyes flickered down to her phone screen, his brow furrowing as he saw the message. He didn't ask questions right away. He could see the fear in her eyes. The silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of unspoken words. "You don't have to go," Dan said, his voice quiet but firm. "You don't have to face this on your own. We can figure this out together." Isla swallowed hard, shaking her head. "I don't even know what this is. These people, I don't know who they are, or why they keep dragging me back into this nightmare." Dan placed a hand on the arm of her wheelchair, his grip steadying her. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. But you're not going alone. Not again." Isla met his gaze, a flicker of something deep inside her, something that felt like a spark of hope. It had been so long since she had someone in her corner. Someone who wasn't just trying to fix her, but someone who truly cared. Maybe Dan wasn't a billionaire or a powerful CEO, but in that moment, he felt more like a hero than anyone she had ever known. "I can't keep running," she said quietly, more to herself than to Dan. "I've been running from this my whole life. From them, from my family, from the way they've always treated me." Dan nodded, his expression soft. "Then let's face it. Together. Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out. But don't do this alone." For the first time in what felt like forever, Isla didn't feel so alone. The drive to the Graves mansion was eerily quiet, the streets slick with rain, the city lights streaking by in a blur of orange and red. Isla's mind raced as she looked out the window, her thoughts spinning in every direction. What was waiting for her at the house? Who were these people threatening her? And why did it feel like she was being pulled into a storm she had no control over? Dan's car hummed along the wet roads, the windshield wipers working overtime as the rain intensified. Every turn felt like it was leading them deeper into unknown territory. "I don't even know what to expect when we get there," Isla said, her voice low. "I've never felt so helpless." Dan glanced at her briefly, his grip on the wheel tight. "You don't have to be helpless. You have more control over this than you think. They're just trying to intimidate you. You've faced worse before. You'll handle this. I know you will." Isla didn't answer right away. The words felt nice, but they didn't completely silence the voice in her head that told her she was in over her head. She wasn't sure what to expect from this encounter, but one thing was clear. Her life, the one she thought she had some control over, was slipping further from her grasp with every passing minute. They reached the gates of the mansion. The driveway was long, lined with towering trees that loomed like silent sentinels. The house itself, a sprawling estate, looked more like a fortress than a home. It was cold, imposing, and utterly unwelcoming. Dan parked the car at the edge of the driveway, just outside the gates, and turned to Isla. "This is it. You ready?" Isla stared at the mansion, feeling the weight of the moment settle heavily in her chest. She had been here countless times before, but never like this. Never with her entire life hanging in the balance. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't think I'm ready." Dan smiled, though it was gentle, reassuring. "It's okay to not feel ready, but we're here now, and you're not alone." The car door opened with a soft thud, and the chill of the night air rushed in, biting at Isla's skin. The mansion loomed ahead, its lights shining through the windows like eyes, watching her every move. They made their way toward the front door, each step echoing in the silent night. As they approached the massive double doors, Isla's heart pounded louder than ever. What was waiting for her behind those doors? What would her family say? What did they want? Just before they reached the door, it swung open. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, with a look of authority that immediately put Isla on edge. His eyes locked onto hers, and she felt an unsettling chill run down her spine. "You're finally here," he said, his voice smooth but cold. "Your mother's been waiting." Isla glanced at Dan, but he didn't seem fazed. He stepped forward, his presence filling the space between them. "We're here now," Dan said calmly. "And whatever's going to happen, we'll deal with it." Isla's heart pounded, her stomach twisting with nerves. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew this moment would change everything. Before they could enter, the man stepped aside to let them through, but his eyes didn't leave Isla's face. "It's time to face the truth, Isla," he said, his voice dripping with something cold and unspoken. "Your life is about to change in ways you don't expect." Isla's breath caught in her throat. What did he mean? What truth was he talking about? And why did it feel like she was walking into something far darker than she ever could have imagined? The door slammed shut behind them with a reverberating force that felt like the weight of the world. Isla's heart raced as she stepped into the cold, marble foyer of the Graves mansion, the towering ceilings casting long shadows across the room. The house felt like a museum, every inch meticulously designed, but there was no warmth here, no comfort, just coldness. The man who had let them in, tall and imposing, led them through the grand hallway. His footsteps were deliberate, echoing off the polished floors. Isla could feel every step like a drumbeat in her chest, each one amplifying the weight of what was about to happen. Dan was by her side, his presence a silent assurance that no matter what, she wasn't facing this alone. But Isla's mind was a whirlwind. What did they want from me? The message, the threats, it felt like a trap she couldn't escape from, one she had walked right into. They arrived at a large, dark wood door at the end of the hall. The man turned to them, his face hard as stone. "Wait here," he said, his voice detached. "I'll inform your mother that you've arrived." As the door swung shut behind him, Isla was left standing in the hallway, the silence swallowing them whole. She could feel her pulse in her neck, the anxiety creeping up her spine. She wasn't sure if she was more afraid of what her family was about to say, or of the feeling that something much bigger was at play, something she had no control over. Dan glanced down at her, his expression softening. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, his voice gentle, as if offering her an out. "Whatever they say, you don't have to take it. You have the power to walk away." Isla shook her head, her breath shaky. "I don't know if I can. They've always had control over me. Always. I can't keep running from this." Dan took a deep breath, stepping closer to her. "You're stronger than you think. You don't have to let them decide who you are anymore." Before Isla could respond, the door to the room opened again. The man who had ushered them in stood there, his face unreadable. "She's ready to see you," he said, stepping aside. Isla felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She glanced at Dan one last time before walking forward, the heavy weight of the moment bearing down on her. The door closed behind them, leaving them in a lavish study, dark mahogany bookshelves lining the walls, the smell of expensive leather filling the air. Veronica stood by the fireplace, her back to them, her posture rigid and controlled, just like always. But when she turned around, Isla saw something different, something she hadn't expected. Fear. For a moment, Isla stood frozen, unsure of what to say or do. Veronica's eyes flicked between Isla and Dan, but it was clear who she was focused on. "You," Veronica spat, her voice sharp, "shouldn't have brought him here." Dan didn't flinch. He stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "Isla doesn't have to face this alone." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "You think you can just waltz in here and make demands?" Her voice rose with each word, but Dan remained calm, unshaken by her fury. Isla stood in the center of the room, watching the exchange unfold. She could feel the tension crackling in the air, the sting of old wounds opening wide again. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about control. About her family trying to force her back into the mold they had crafted for her, a mold she had never fit into. "Why are you doing this, Mom?" Isla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why can't you just let me go? Let me live my own life?" Veronica's gaze flickered with something unreadable. For a second, Isla thought she saw a glimmer of regret, but it was gone just as quickly as it appeared. "Because you're my daughter, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect you. You don't understand what's at stake here. This isn't just about you. It's about your future." Isla clenched her fists at her sides, trying to calm the storm of emotions building inside her. She had heard this speech 100 times. "My future? Or yours?" Veronica's face twisted in anger. "You don't know what you're talking about, Isla. You're not capable of making decisions like this. Not when you're—" She stopped herself abruptly, her eyes darkening as she glared at Dan. "And you," she said, pointing at him. "You've poisoned her mind. You've made her think she's some sort of hero. You've turned her against her own family." Dan stepped forward again, but Isla placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. Her eyes never left her mother's face as she spoke. "I'm not turning against anyone, Mom. I'm just trying to live my life. My life." Veronica's expression hardened. "You think you can make decisions like this on your own? You're too young. You don't know what the real world is like." Isla's voice rose, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Maybe I'm tired of living in a world you created for me. Maybe I'm tired of being told who I am, what I can be, and what I can't." The room fell silent. Veronica's eyes burned into her, but Isla stood her ground. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to shrink. She wasn't going to let her mother's control suffocate her anymore. Suddenly, the door slammed open with force, and another figure stepped into the room, one Isla hadn't expected to see. Her father. His face was grim, his posture just as rigid as Veronica's, but there was something different in his eyes. Fear? Guilt? "Isla," he said softly, his voice carrying an edge she hadn't heard before. "It's time to face the truth. Everything you've been running from. It's all about to come out." Isla's heart thudded loudly in her chest as she turned to face her father, standing in the doorway like a figure out of her past. His presence was both familiar and unsettling. The man she had known for years as someone who would protect her, guide her, and love her unconditionally, now stood there like a stranger, his eyes hard with something unreadable. "Why are you here?" Isla's voice was tight, each word laced with disbelief. Her father, the one person she thought she could count on, had never been a part of her battles before. He had always kept his distance, letting Veronica run the show. But now, standing in this cold, dark room, it seemed like everything had changed. Her father didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped inside, his footsteps heavy, and closed the door behind him. The room seemed to shrink as he took his place beside Veronica, his back straight, his face stern. Isla couldn't breathe. This was it. The confrontation she had been dreading the moment her whole life, her choices, her freedom, would be put on trial. "You don't get to just walk away from this, Isla," her father said, his voice calm but with an edge of finality. "There are things you don't understand, things you've been kept in the dark about." Dan, who had been standing quietly by Isla's side, shifted slightly, as if he was ready to intervene if needed. But Isla could feel his presence, steady and unyielding, a silent promise that he wouldn't let her go through this alone. "I'm not in the dark," Isla replied, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm not a little girl anymore. I'm not a pawn in your game." Veronica's lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You think this is a game, Isla? You think you can just make these decisions, ruin everything we've worked for, and walk away with no consequences?" Her tone was cold, calculated. Isla's gaze snapped to her mother's, searching for any trace of the woman who used to care about her happiness, who used to smile when she walked into the room. But all she saw was a woman who had built a prison around her daughter, a woman who wanted to control every part of Isla's life. "I'm not ruining anything, Mom. I'm just trying to live," Isla said, her voice trembling slightly. "But you're not letting me." Her father's voice broke through the rising tension again. "Isla, there's something you don't know. Something we've kept from you, for your own good." The words hit Isla like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" Her father exchanged a brief look with Veronica, and for a moment, Isla thought she saw hesitation in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. Her father sighed deeply, like the weight of whatever he was about to say was almost too much for him to bear. "You're not the person you think you are. We've been trying to protect you from the truth, from this." Isla's stomach twisted with confusion. "What truth?" Dan stepped forward, his voice quiet but forceful. "Whatever it is, Isla doesn't need to hear it like this. Not when you've spent her whole life hiding things from her. If you've got something to say, then say it." Veronica shot him a venomous look, but Isla could see the faint flicker of fear in her eyes. Whatever was coming, it was something they hadn't planned on. Her father looked down at the floor, avoiding her gaze for a long moment. Then, finally, he spoke. "Isla, your mother and we've kept this from you because we thought it would be better this way. But you deserve to know the truth. Your biological father, he's not who you think he is. The man you've known all your life. The man who raised you. He isn't your real father." Isla's breath caught in her throat. The words rang out in the room like a death knell. It felt like the world had just stopped spinning. The very foundation of her life, everything she had ever known, everything she had ever believed, felt like it had been ripped away in an instant. Her father continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "We never told you the truth because we thought you were better off not knowing. Your real father, he was involved in some dangerous things that we couldn't protect you from." Isla shook her head, struggling to process what she was hearing. "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" Her father swallowed, his face pale. "Your real father was involved in organized crime. He was dangerous. He hurt people, and we made the decision to keep you away from him. We didn't want you to grow up in that world." Isla's head spun. She felt like the room was closing in on her. the walls pressing in on all sides. The man she had known as her father, the one she trusted with everything, had been lying to her whole life. "No," Isla whispered, the word feeling foreign in her mouth. "That's not possible. You can't." Her voice cracked, and she choked back the tears, threatening to spill. Veronica stepped forward, her eyes softening just for a moment. "We did it to protect you, Isla. We thought we were protecting you, but the truth is, your real father was a criminal, and we kept you from him because we wanted you to have a better life." Isla's heart shattered. She didn't know who she was anymore. Who could she trust? The parents who had raised her, who had kept her in the dark her entire life? Or the man she had just met, the janitor who had somehow become the one person who had shown her what real care and honesty meant? As the silence stretched between them, Isla felt the weight of the revelation sink deeper into her bones. She had always thought she knew who she was meant to be. But now, the very foundation of her life felt like it was crumbling beneath her. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, the message was simple, but the words cut through her like a knife. "You have one last chance to come home, Isla. You've been warned." Isla's hands gripped her phone so tightly that her knuckles were white. The message she'd just received felt like the final blow, each word slicing through the air with a finality she wasn't ready to face. "You've been warned." The weight of those words crashed over her like a tidal wave, but instead of collapsing under the pressure, she straightened her back, her mind starting to clear. For so long, her life had been dictated by people who never asked what she wanted. It had been decided for her, her future, her choices, her identity, all decided by the very people who claimed to love her, protect her. But now, with every truth that had been uncovered, with every layer that had been peeled back, Isla saw for the first time that she had the power to rewrite her story. She wasn't just the girl in the wheelchair anymore. She wasn't just the girl who had been hidden away in the shadows of her family's wealth and secrets. She was Isla Graves, a young woman who could choose her own path. "Dan," Isla whispered, the strength of her voice catching him off guard. He'd been standing quietly beside her, the weight of her emotions hanging heavily in the air. But now, she could see the shift in him. He turned to her, meeting her gaze with a kind of understanding that went deeper than words. "I'm here, Isla," he said softly, his presence like a lifeline she wasn't sure she deserved, but couldn't bear to let go of. "I need to make a choice," Isla said, her voice firm, though it trembled slightly. "I need to choose my own life. No more hiding. No more living in fear of what's been kept from me." Dan nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "And whatever you choose, I'll be here, every step of the way." For a moment, Isla looked at the faces of the people who had shaped her life. Her mother, her father. They stood in the shadows of the room, their expressions unreadable, but Isla could feel the finality of the moment. This was her decision, her future. "I'm not going back to the way things were," Isla said, her voice strong, unwavering. "Not to the lies, not to the control, not to any of it. I'm going to live the life I've been hiding from, the life I choose." Her father's face tightened, his mouth opening as though to speak, but he stopped himself. Veronica, too, said nothing. The silence between them was deafening, and for the first time, Isla didn't need their approval. She didn't need their permission. She had already made her choice. Dan stepped forward, a slight smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You don't need to answer to them anymore," he said softly, his eyes full of pride. "You're your own person." Isla turned toward the door, her gaze fixed ahead as if the world outside was waiting for her. She had no idea what was waiting for her, but for the first time, she was ready to find out, ready to take control of her destiny. "I'm done with being told who I am," Isla said, her words strong and clear. "I'm going to live, Dan. I'm going to live on my terms." The door opened, and the cool night air rushed in, mingling with the warmth of the room. It felt like the world had suddenly shifted, and in that moment, Isla knew she wasn't just walking out the door. She was walking toward her new life. As they stepped out into the night, the sound of the mansion door closing behind them felt like the closing of a chapter, a chapter filled with secrets, control, and suffocating expectations. And as the cool night air touched her skin, Isla took a deep breath, feeling free for the first time in her life. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape. As they walked toward the car, Isla's phone buzzed once again. This time, the message was from an unknown number, a message that made her stop in her tracks. "You'll never be free. We always find our way back to you." Isla's heart skipped a beat. Who were these people, and how far would they go to keep her in their world of lies? Don't forget to subscribe to find out what happens next. Isla's journey is just beginning. Hit the notification bell and leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think Isla will do next? Will the past really let her go?